Hey guys, Heidi Preep here. Welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back if you're not. I am making this video today because the last video that I made was called How to Be Sad, and the responses to the video were kind of mixed, which I sort of expected, in that a lot of people were like, yeah, I really struggle with sitting with feelings of sadness as well and allowing those to exist in my body, mind, psyche. And other people were like, okay, great, but can you teach us how to stop being sad? And the answer to that is yes, that is actually easier for me. Kind of. Like, I think that for most of my life, because I historically have erred a lot more on the avoidant side of the attachment spectrum, I have struggled to sit with negative emotions, allow myself to take them seriously in myself the way I take them seriously in other people. And so it's only really been recently in my life that I have started feeling what I believe are situationally appropriate negative emotions. So when something sad happens, I feel sad, and that should not be new for me, but it kind of is. So lately, I am going through some personal shit that is really hard, and I am feeling sad a lot. And I am noticing, kind of interestingly, that the way I take myself out of sadness and I'm learning to kind of cope with sadness requires an integration of both sides, right? If you don't know how to be sad, you also don't know how to be happy, and vice versa. And that's like the oldest saying in the book, and I am reluctantly learning that it's true. But I felt like it was an appropriate time to make this video because I am currently trying to take myself out of my own wallowing a little bit. So if that's something you're struggling with, let's move through that together. So the first thing I want to address, and this is how I look at absolutely every area of mental health, is that until we understand the function of whatever it is that we want to do away with, it's going to be really hard to do away with it. Because when our unconscious minds are holding on to any particular experience or thought or emotion, they're usually doing it because they're getting something out of it. So we are getting something out of it without realizing what. And very often, if you are someone who has a pattern of struggling to let go of negative emotions, as we were talking about in the last video, it tends to mean that you're likely to be on the anxious side of the attachment spectrum. So whether that's anxious attachment or some people who have fearful avoidant attachment. And there's actually a perfectly logical reason why those on the anxious side of the attachment spectrum tend to struggle to let go of negative feelings. And the reason is because they worked really well for you at a given point in your life. So when we are very young and we're developing our emotional system, we learn to perpetuate the emotions that get us what we want. Because when we are infants, we are completely and totally geared towards survival. So those on the avoidant side of the spectrum, which we talked about in the last video, learned very young that they got the most care and attention and positive feedback out of their caregivers when they displayed positive emotion and when they inhibited negative emotion. So maybe their parents rejected them or showed disgust towards them anytime they cried or showed need or vulnerability, but as long as they were acting like everything was good and they were happy and there was no problems, they would get the care and nurturance that they needed. So they learned that negative emotions really aren't that important in getting us what we want, so we don't need to focus much on those, and we definitely don't need to show them. But with the anxious side of the spectrum, sort of the opposite thing happened. So if you're on the anxious side of the attachment spectrum, it's likely that your parents responded the most to you when you displayed negative emotion. So when you cried, when you showed need or vulnerability, you were more likely to have your needs met. So from a young age, you internalized, okay, the more I hang on to negative emotion and show it to other people, the more I'm going to get my survival needs met. And this kind of conditioning, this kind of, I don't love the word programming, but I will use it here because it does kind of apply, sticks with us. So when we learn showing negative emotion gets me what I need out of life, it's a survival strategy, we learn for the rest of our lives to overvalue negative emotion when it comes up. And the thought of letting go of that negative emotion might actually be kind of scary to you on an unconscious level, because you might deeply believe, if I stop being sad, if I stop showing my vulnerability and need to other people, I will be left alone forever. And interestingly, this is the complete inverse of how the avoidant feels, which is that if I do show vulnerability and need, I will be left alone forever, or I will be outcasted in some way. So the first thing to keep in mind, if this is something you really struggle with, is getting stuck in those negative emotions, is that this almost definitely does have a survival value for you on an unconscious level. Now, you might be in a situation now as an adult where you no longer need to hold on to that negativity, right? Where you would not necessarily be abandoned by your friends and loved ones if you were to express happiness and you were to step out of the negative emotions that you feel. So we're going to talk about how to do that, but before we talk about how to do that, we have to talk about how you are perpetuating your negative experiences. So, everyone feels sad. Even those who do not consciously feel a lot of sadness experience sadness. So the experience of sadness, like any emotion, is just a feeling in the body, right? So for me, sadness feels very exhausting. Like I want to lie down, I want to not do anything, I want to not think, I want to not act, I want to just take time to be alone with myself, and almost like it feels like my body wants to sink back into the earth. That's what sadness feels like for me. For other people, it's different. But feelings that are pure. And when I say feelings that are pure, I mean physiological reactions to what happens around us don't last for as long as we tend to think that they do. So there'll be days, especially lately, where I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's a sad day. Today is gonna be a bad day. I'm not going to get much done. And because I'm in a whole phase of my life where I'm trying really hard to listen to my emotions, I usually go, okay, how can I clear my schedule? How can I make sure I don't need to do as much as I would otherwise have to do today so I can attend to this sadness? And then sometimes, because I'm trying to stay extremely aware of my emotional state moment to moment, half an hour later, I'll be in the kitchen and sun will be shining and a song will come on that I like. And I'll be like, oh, in this moment, I want to dance, I want to move, I feel good. I don't feel the same way that I felt an hour ago when I woke up. But it's really easy as human beings to perpetuate the story that we have in our head about how we're feeling and distrust the actual feelings that are showing up moment to moment in our bodies. So even let's say a year ago, not having the experience with somatic work that I now have, I would have felt that moment of, ooh, I kind of want to dance and sing, I feel good right now. And I would have gone, no, I'm having a sad day. I'm going to go back to my bed and I'm going to continue my day of being sad. And I would have brought up this story that I'd created inside my own mind, which is that today I am sad, I will be sad all day. This thing that is happening in my life is necessitating sadness within me, and I have to follow that feeling because I noticed it one time, and now I think that that's the only feeling I can feel for a while. And this kind of story that we tell ourselves is often a much greater cause of the sadness than the actual physical sadness that lives in our body. So the number one thing we need to start doing if we want to change our emotional state is be aware of which actual states we are feeling moment to moment, okay? We can feel 3 different things over the course of 10 minutes, and we can allow ourselves to shift and adapt to each of them. But if we are telling ourselves these stories about our emotions and staying loyal to those stories, even when our bodies aren't necessarily aligning with them quite the same way they were when we first crafted those stories, we are going to perpetuate feelings of sadness. Because if I wake up and tell myself I'm sad today, then I start feeling happy, then I go, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to retell myself the story about why I'm sad. And my body is going to react to that mental image that I'm feeding it of the sad, terrible, tragic thing that's happening in my life, right? And now my body is going to bring that physiological feeling of sadness back into it, and I'm going to perpetuate my own negative response pattern. So the first thing to do here is be aware of the fact that your mind might have been conditioned to do this automatically. So from a very young age, you may have learned it's adaptive for you to tell yourself these stories about your own sadness and to perpetuate them inside of your mind so that even if your brain starts feeling kind of good for a minute, your impulse is to return to that story and go, no, that's wrong. I'm not happy, I'm sad. And you have to start practicing catching yourself in those moments in order to start riding those waves. And sometimes I think that those who struggle with sadness can actually need to know that their sadness is not going away. So you can tell yourself, oh, I feel good right now. Maybe I'm having a sad day, but I can dance for 10 minutes. I can laugh with my friend for 10 minutes. I can enjoy scrolling through Instagram for 10 minutes or whatever it is that makes you happy online. It's okay to tell yourself, if I am experiencing something that I think I need to process, I can put it down and come back to it later. My sadness, my grief, my pain will still be there. Okay? It's not like if you abandon it in one moment, it's never coming back. And so sometimes, as weird as it sounds to say that, just reminding our bodies and our nervous systems, hey, I haven't forgotten about what you're feeling. I'm just not going to feel it in this moment, can actually give us kind of a hall pass to start experiencing at least moments of happiness, moments of joy within even the greater, more depressing periods of our lives. But this kind of brings me to my next point, which is that a lot of the time when we don't have a lot of experience feeling a given emotion, we actually have to practice and kind of create a template for ourselves to feel that thing. And I know this because I have been doing it with sadness. When I started working with my current therapist, anytime I showed any sadness, vulnerability, like anytime I started to tear up in a session, he would stop me and be like, wait, we are going to amplify that feeling, actually. We're gonna sit with that down-regulated feeling in your body, and we're gonna try to stay with it and see if we can. And if you struggle with positive feelings, you might need to do the same thing in the opposite direction. And so I like to call this creating a template for the emotion. Because just like our brains have memories, our bodies have memories, right? Our bodies remember feelings and our experience of those feelings, and they will slip in and out of feeling things more regularly depending on what we're used to feeling. So if a feeling is kind of foreign to our bodies are likely to try to find a way to change out of that state because they don't have a somatic template for navigating through them. So earlier I was giving the example of dancing around my kitchen, right? I am not a person who has ever been particularly comfortable with kind of the flowier aspects of having a body. Like I like running and weight training and sports that are kind of grounded and concise, and I have never been a person who has felt particularly free in the way that I express myself physically. And this past winter, when I was going through a pretty tough time in my personal life, I was living with someone who really liked to do daily dance parties. And she had this practice of like in between calls, she would just throw on music and go outside and just dance completely freely for like 5 to 10 minutes. And she started knocking on my door and being like, Heidi, I am forcing you into a dance party because I know that you are feeling down today. And I hated it. God, I hated it. Like I did it because I wanted to make friends with her and I wanted to accommodate what she found exciting. And also like when people are just trying to be nice to me, I think it's nice to let them be nice to me, you know? Because it's just nice when people are thinking of you, right? So her and I would have our dance parties, and at first I felt super self-conscious, and then after a little bit I was like, whatever, you're not looking at me, I'm not looking at you. And we would just rock out for 5 to 10 minutes and then stop. And then I came home, I'm back in my apartment in Toronto now, and all of a sudden I started noticing there are all of these moments where I want to dance. I want to throw on some music, close my blinds, and just let my body do its thing and process whatever it needs to process through movement. And I would never have noticed those moments and taken them seriously if I didn't have a template for it. So if I hadn't had these memories of dancing around my friend's apartment with her, I would never have gone, oh, I recognize the feeling of wanting to dance, right? At different times in my life, I've had to learn to recognize the feeling of, I want to be healthy. I grew up super unhealthy, not eating anything that was good for me, and it took me until my mid-20s to even recognize the feeling of like, oh, what my body is actually craving is vegetables or a hard workout or whatever it is. And I only got to that place after having had experiences where, let's say I was living in a community where healthy meals were fed to me, or I'd started a workout regime that I'd gotten used to somatically. My body has now logged memories of what these emotional states feel like: healthy, energetic, strong, lively, and vivacious, like that feeling of wanting to dance and move and be in your body. We need to practice these things weirdly, awkwardly, and badly first so that we start building memories of them and we start to notice the moments that correspond to those memories. It used to be like sometimes I would get this restless energy and I'd be like, oh, I guess I need to go for a run or I need to weight train. And that was a way of getting energy out of my body. But what I actually wanted in those times was expressive movement. And I didn't know it because I did not have a template for what it was like to dance, at least while I was sober. So the quote that kept coming to mind was, there's this quote that's attributed to like some anonymous person in the Navy or something like that, that goes, under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. That's why we train so hard. So as silly as it's gonna sound, if you want to start changing the way that you emotionally show up in the world, you have to literally train yourself to feel the emotions that you traditionally have not made a habit out of feeling. Because to bring it full circle, it's all about having that moment-to-moment awareness of what's happening in your body and being willing to show up to that and to respond to it appropriately. If you are completely and totally used to feeling sad, your body has a really good template for sadness. It probably doesn't doesn't have as much of a template, as much training in the realm of happiness. And so the goal is not to squash down your sadness, tell it shouldn't exist anymore, and then only go feel great forever. It's literally just to be aware moment to moment of which tiny physiological potentials are bubbling up in your body. Okay? So in one moment, you might feel suddenly overwhelmed and like you really want to cry. And the potential for sadness is inviting itself into your body. And it can be a great thing in those moments to follow that sensation through, to cry, to let it out, to let your body do what it wants to do. But there will be other moments where you feel a little bit energized, a little bit excited, a little bit happy or surprised in a pleasant way. And if you have not practiced what to do with happiness when it comes up for you, you won't necessarily follow that sensation through. So all that this is the practice of following those sensations through in our bodies as they come up for us, when they come up for us. And the cool thing is that the more you practice both ends of the spectrum, the more balanced you become in your approach to life overall. And at the end of the day, that is all that secure attachment is. It's being able to respond to what's actually happening in our bodies as it's authentically happening to us, and not becoming neurotically caught in either end of that emotional spectrum. So either holding on super tightly to sadness or holding on super tightly to happiness and self-sufficiency. There is very much a time and a place for both of those emotions, and figuring out what that time and place is and being able to show up wholly and completely to every moment in either direction is what gives us that balanced approach to our emotional systems overall. My most recent favorite thing to do is anytime someone asks me how I've been, is to respond that it depends on the minute you catch me, because that is the absolute truth of my life lately. I am going through a lot of stuff and it feels hard most days, but also like there are moments of incredible joy and incredible hope and incredible excitement, which I think is kind of a natural response to anything going wrong in life. Every time we lose something, we necessarily open up space for something else. And so a balanced approach to life is, even through periods of grief, we can also recognize those periods of joy and excitement and opportunity that are now available for us. And on the flip side, if you're someone like myself who struggles more with the sadness side of the spectrum, it can also be great to realize that during the periods of our lives where things are going really well, there is also pain and regret and struggle and challenges that are inherent to even the absolute best situations in our lives. And as long as we don't get too detached from either side of that spectrum, we're probably doing okay. But for those of us who did not grow up securely attached, one side or the other usually requires some practice. So if this video is one that you resonate much more so with than the other video, I want to challenge you to just notice the next time you feel some kind of upbeat, positive energy in your body, and take a minute to 90 seconds to just let that energy out and feel it and experience it in whatever way feels the most authentic to you in that moment. And it's fine if it feels awkward and weird in whatever way you're doing it, because right now all you're doing is laying down that template and letting your body know it's safe for me to let out this emotion, and oh look, everyone I love didn't immediately abandon me as soon as I felt like and leaned into the feeling of I'm doing well for 90 seconds. And this goes into a much larger conversation about attachment healing, which I do promise we will get to. But for today, I just want to challenge all of us who feel like we err too much on one side of the emotional spectrum or the other to put some practice work in to that side of the spectrum that we find comes a little bit less naturally to us. Let me know in the comments what that looks like for you, what your favorite way to express any emotion is, really, because I think we could all probably use some tips if we've ended up here. But as always, I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other, and I will definitely see you back here again really soon.